What if the secret to building $1 billion company was hidden in a hedge fund handbook? And what if the most valuable playbook for deep tech founders came from a man who almost went bankrupt predicting the economy? Ray Dalio is definitely not your typical startup guru. He built Bridgewater into the world's largest hedge fund, not with charisma, but with a system. And here is the kicker. Dalio's greatest innovation wasn't a financial model. It was a way of thinking. His book, Principles, lays out a radical philosophy. Design your company like a machine. Make decisions based on believability, not politics. Treat pain as a signal to reflect, not retreat. And build a culture where truth is prized more than harmony. Most people skim this book for quotes. But under the surface, it's a tactical goldmine for anyone in venture, especially in deep tech where complexity, failure, and ego collide every single day. That's why in this episode, I will break it down in 4 layers. First, you will hear the essence of Principles, why it matters, and what makes it different. Then we will explore how this book applies to investors and founders in high uncertainty industries. Next, I will walk you through 7 killer takeaways, the ones that shifted how I think about people, systems, and failure. And finally, for each takeaway, I will leave you with 3 coaching questions to take back to your team or fund. You will get stories, systems, and scripts. But here is my real goal. By the end of this episode, I want you to start seeing your company not as a product, but as a decision-making machine that evolves faster than the market. Let's get into it. But before we start, let me answer one question I'm sure some listeners will have in their minds right now. Why does this book matter if you are building or investing in the future? And let's be honest, most founders don't read hedge fund memoirs, and honestly, most of them shouldn't. But Principles is different. Dalio didn't just build a fund, he built a decision-making machine, one that worked under pressure, got better over time, and didn't collapse when he stepped away. So if you're a deep tech founder, you're in the trenches with hard science, complex timelines, and existential risk. That means your real job isn't pitching, coding, or even managing. Your job is designing a system that makes better decisions than you do, especially when you are tired, wrong, or just absent. If you're an investor, your entire edge depends on seeing what others miss. Principles gives you a framework to separate the noise from the signal, to triangulate truths faster, and to coach founders without becoming their bottleneck. Dalio doesn't teach you what to think. He teaches you how to think in systems. And that's what deep tech needs most. That's why this book isn't just useful, it's mission critical. But before we dive deeper, if you're enjoying this so far, do me a small favor. That makes a huge difference for the team of the podcast. Hit that follow button. Leave a quick rating or review. And if something resonates, share this episode with a person who'd love it. Why? Because it helps grow the show, attract even more world-class thinkers, and best of all, it keeps every episode completely free for you, always. Thank you for being part of this, and now let's get into it. But who is Ray Dalio? You probably wouldn't guess that one of the most influential thinkers on decision-making started his career as a golf caddy. That's where Ray Dalio first picked up tips from Wall Street traders, holding clubs, listening in, and making his first stock pick at age 12. Fast forward a few decades, and Ray built Bridgewater Associates, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, managing over $150 billion at its peak. But here is what makes him different and why principle matters. Dalio didn't just outperform the markets. He reverse engineered reality, built a company around truth and transparency, and treated his team like a living decision-making algorithm. He called the system an idea meritocracy, where the best ideas win, not the biggest titles. And it worked. His fund was ranked by Fortune and Bloomberg as one of the most successful in history. But it wasn't a straight climb. In the early 1980s, he bet everything on a market crash. Every single dollar. And he was wrong. Publicly. Lost everything. Had to borrow $4,000 from his dad just to pay his bills. Most people would crawl into a cave. But Dalio didn't. He started writing down every lesson he could find. That painful reset became the seed for Principles, a manual on how to think clearly, act rationally, and build organizations that don't break under pressure. He spent 40 years refining these principles with brutal honesty. And when he stepped back from Bridgewater, he made them public, not just as a book, but as a playbook for anyone facing complexity, uncertainty, or high-stakes decisions. Which is why we are here. Because whether you are backing biotech moonshots or building artificial intelligence from scratch, the ability to think clearly under pressure might be your only real edge. Let's get into how Ray Dalio thinks and how you can apply it in your company or fund. Now, some listeners might ask at this point, what's Principles actually about that's worth my time? At first glance, it looks like a self-help book for CEOs. But if you zoom in, Principles is something much deeper. It's a playbook for building reality-based thinking in yourself, in your team, and in your entire company. Ray Dalio breaks the book into two parts. The first one is life principles, and the second one, work principles. But don't expect soft philosophy or TED Talk fluff. This is a book building a mental operating system, one that works under stress, under uncertainty, and under pressure to perform. The core idea? Pain plus reflection equals progress. Ray Dalio believes that every mistake contains a lesson. And if you reflect deeply enough, you can design better decisions, better systems, and better outcomes. This concept shows up again and again throughout the book. You will learn to diagnose problems at their root, not just treat the symptoms. You learn to embrace failure as part of building real skill, not as a detour. You learn to build teams around truth, not ego, through radical honesty and transparency. And maybe, most importantly, you learn that the world doesn't reward the smartest ideas, it rewards the clearest decisions. That's why Ray Dalio developed tools like believability weighted decision making, where not every opinion is weighted equally. Dot collectors and algorithmic feedback loops to remove bias from evaluations. A culture where disagreement isn't conflict, it's a feature. So why should founders and venture capitalists care? Simple. Deep tech is not linear. The bets are risky, the stakes are high. And the ability to think clearly, especially when your assumptions break, is the difference between scaling or sinking. This book isn't perfect, it's long, it's repetitive, and sometimes sounds like an HR handbook written by a hedge fund mark. But inside, there is pure gold. Especially if you are trying to build something hard, something new, something no one's done before. If you're wondering whether to read the book, this next part is for you. Because we are about to unpack 7 of the most actionable founder-relevant ideas that run through Dalio's system. Each one is a mindset shift you can apply immediately. Whether you're investing in a team, coaching a CEO, or scaling your own company. So If you only stay for one more thing, let it be the first principle. It might rewire how you think about your role as a founder or investor. Let's dive into section 1, build your company like a machine, not a hero's journey like in Disney movies. And this might surprise you, but most startups fail not because the product was bad, but because the founder thought they were the hero. You know the story: late nights, sheer willpower, high pain tolerance. They sprint through walls until they burn out. What they should have been building was a machine that could sprint without them. Ray Dalio puts it bluntly in the book on page 140. Think of yourself as a machine operating within a machine. And that idea hits deep because you are in deep tech, artificial intelligence, biotech, climate, defense. You are not just trying to survive, you are trying to scale precision. Heroics don't scale. They win one battle and that's it. Systems do scale. They win the war. The companies that win aren't run by martyrs. They are built by architects. So here is the problem. Most early stage teams confuse momentum with structure. The founder is in every single decision. They are hiring reactively. They are constantly doing, rarely designing. It feels like progress because there is a lot of activity, but when the cracks show, there is no system to hold it all together. Now imagine you are raising $100 million fund or backing a founder racing against the clock in a regulated market. If they don't have a repeatable system for product development or hiring or regulatory response, you are betting on chaos. And Dalio says it clearly on page 179. You are not born with the ability to make good decisions. You learn it like anything else by creating systems, refining them, and applying them again and again and again. In other words, your job isn't to muscle through problems. It's to create a machine that solves them without your direct input. So, what does the machine mindset look like? It starts with stepping back. Ray Dalio describes it on page 176. Go back before you go forward. Replay the story of where you have been, then visualize what you and others must do to reach your goals. Dalio literally treats companies like engineering systems. He maps out who does what, when, and how success gets measured. Hiring, that's a module. It has metrics, scripts, feedback loops. Decision making, he introduces believability weighting and structured disagreements. Another system. At Bridgewater, even culture was engineered. Think of your plan as being like a movie script. You go from the big picture and drill down to specific tasks and estimated timelines. You can read it on page 177 in the book. If that sounds extreme, it is, but it works. The result? He scaled one of the most successful hedge funds in history by not being the hero. He was the architect and engineer. Now, let's bring this home. In deep tech, you can't afford fragility. You are building in a landscape full of unknowns, capital cycles, regulatory traps. If your team relies on gut feeling or last-minute brilliance, it will break. Definitely. Founders who win over time do what Dalio did. They step back, build the machine, and let it run. Here is the kicker, another one from the book. Great planners who don't execute their plans, they go nowhere. But also on the contrary, great executors without design, they will hit limits pretty fast. The truth lies in the middle, execution and planning. You are not here to fight fires. You are here to build the firehouse. Because in the end, the founders who win are the ones who fire themselves from operations. So they can lead. Let's wrap the first section up with my usual free coaching questions to help you reflect on how you can prepare your mind for contrarian thinking. Where in your company or fund are you still acting like the hero? What's one recurring problem that could be solved better by designing a system, not working harder? The third one, if someone took over your company tomorrow, would it run or collapse? So let's move forward to section 2, get the people right. You have probably heard this one. A great idea with the wrong team will fail. A mediocre idea with the right team will win. But Ray Dalio says it even sharper. The who is more important than the what. You can build the best machine, the best system, the best processes when you don't hire an A team, but let it operate by a B or C team, it will fail. And especially if you're in deep tech, where cycles are long, pivots are painful, and stakes are high, this isn't just advice. It's pure survival. Founders usually love to obsess over tech. VCs love to chase the market. But Bridgewater's success was built on a different obsession: people. Dalio spent decades developing a systematic way to see people clearly, not just resumes, patterns, decisions, accountability, and growth. He treated his team like the engine of the company, and every engine component had to fit or get replaced. Because when the wrong person is in the system, you don't just stall, you crash. Most startups fail to scale not because the tech broke, but because the team broke. And the worst part? It happens slowly, silently. You look around and realize we've been tolerating mediocrity for months. Dalio puts it plainly. It's on page 400 in the book. If they still can't do the job after you've trained them and given them time to learn, get rid of them. But here is what kills founders: loyalty bias. You hired your best friend, or you trust the person who was there from day one. Now you're stuck, not because they are bad, but because the company has outgrown them and you can't face it. Dalio warns on page 231 in the book, every startup and investment hinges on the team. Getting the right people in the right roles is the key to succeeding at whatever you choose to accomplish. You're building a machine, remember? If one gear is not turning, the whole thing grinds. Dalio's solution? Run your team like a high-performance engine. Assess each single part. Evaluate people against outcomes. If they can't grow, let them go. Here is how he did it. He created, and this is a good one, baseball cards for every employee, literally rating them on key traits and evolving them over time. He measured progress constantly, made accountability visible, and held no illusion about potential without proof. This wasn't cold-hearted, it was kind realism, helping people evolve, and if they couldn't, helping them exit. Because in deep tech, misalignment compounds. A single mismatch in a core technical hire or on the cap table, that's a 12-month burn. The opportunity cost of one mishire isn't just salary. It's delayed learning, it's missed pivots, it's investor doubt, it's team morale erosion. Every day you delay the hard conversation, you're putting the company at risk. Dalio writes again, page 491. If you have the same people doing the same things, you should expect the same results. So if you want to have other results, change the tasks or change the people. Or in Dalio's words, if the results aren't working, you don't change the mission. You change the team. Here is what the best do differently. They act early. They measure people against future fit, not just past loyalty. They build a culture where evolving or exiting is part of the journey, not a betrayal. Because the truth is, who you build with will determine what you can actually build. Let's wrap this section 2 up with my 3 coaching questions to help you reflect on your team and leadership design. So the first question is, who on your team is out of sync with your mission, but you're avoiding the hard conversation? Are you designing roles around people you like or around the outcomes you need? If you could rehire your current team today, who wouldn't make the cut and why? And this brings us right to section 3. Radical truth and transparency are force multipliers. Did you ever sit through a startup board meeting and think everyone here knows what's wrong, but no one's saying it out loud? Yes, Ray Dalio would call that a silent killer. He puts it plainly on page 323. Truth is the essential foundation of any good outcome. In other words, if you are not telling the truth, you are building on sand. Startups are fragile. They don't die from competition, they die from silence, from half-truths, from a team pretending it's fine when it's not. Radical transparency isn't about being blunt or rude. It's about being real early. Because if your company is a machine, truth is the oil. No truth, the gears grind. Then they snap. Dalio saw this firsthand at Bridgewater. He didn't just talk about feedback, he institutionalized it. Real-time feedback tools, open recordings, post-mortems, a culture where nothing important stays unspoken. Most teams run on what Dalio calls filtered information. People hold back, they protect egos, they want to look good. On page 352, he says, don't worry about looking good. Worry about achieving your goals. The results in startups that don't care about the truth, mistakes repeat, trust erodes, decisions drift off course because no one had the courage to say, that ain't working. The irony, founders say they want honest culture, but flinch at tough conversations. They don't want to tell the CTO their team is too slow, or admit to investors that the milestone won't be hit, or confess to themselves that the product isn't resonating. Dalio warns, page 309. If you don't talk openly about issues and have paths for working through them, you won't have partners who collectively own the outcomes. And even worse, without truth, people start to perform for optics. They play not to lose instead of playing to win. So what's the antidote? Radical truth plus radical transparency. Dalio in his book, page 323, being radically truthful and transparent with your colleagues ensures that important issues are apparent instead of hidden. Here's how that plays out in startups. You run post-mortems even when it hurts. An operation failed, sit down, provide honest feedback. Google how the Navy SEALs teams do it. You update investors with what really happened, not just the public relations versions. You give teammates feedback before the performance drops, so they have a shot at growing and getting it right. Don't hide your feedback and let them fade in plain sight. Dalio pushed this to the edge. At Bridgewater, team meetings were recorded. Feedback was continuous and public. People shared the hardest things first because trust was built on honesty, not comfort. Page 333 in the book, he says, share the things that are hardest to share, because if you don't, you will lose the trust and partnership of the people you are not sharing with. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It might upset someone, but you know what's worse? avoiding the conversation, watch conflicts go cold and grow in silence, and then observing the company slowly implode. Here is the truth. Radical transparency isn't a culture for everyone. But if you want to build a deep tech company that lasts like Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, OpenAI, feedback is the fuel. Mistakes lead to real change, and ideas win over egos. Only then radical truth becomes your competitive advantage. Let's wrap up this truth section with 3 coaching questions to help you reflect on truth, trust, and transparency. First, ask yourself, what uncomfortable truth are you avoiding sharing with your team, your board, or even yourself? Is your corporate culture optimizing for feeling good or for getting better? And when was the last time someone gave you, as a CEO or the investor, direct feedback and you thanked them for it? Let me ask you one question first. What happens when you combine radical truth plus radical transparency plus believability weighted decision making? You get an idea meritocracy. And this is what section 4 is all about. You think the best ideas win in most companies? That's wrong. They don't. The loudest voice wins, or the most senior title, or the person who plays politics best. Ray Dalio's whole system exists to fight that. He built Bridgewater into one of the most successful investment firms in history by creating something extremely rare. A culture where truth wins and ego loses. Now, here's the twist. Dalio doesn't believe in flat democracy. He doesn't believe everyone's opinion should carry equal weight. That would be chaos. Instead, he pioneered a system where decisions are weighted by believability. In other words, who has the most track record and insight in this area? Give the vote more weight. He writes in the book on page 321, an ideal meritocracy requires that people be open-minded and assertive at the same time. This sounds elegant, but it's brutal in practice. It means every team member has to be comfortable being questioned and being wrong. In most startups, decisions are made by the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. It feels efficient, but it stifles innovation. The people closest to the problem, product leads, engineers, researchers, they get all ignored. And what happens? You lose your best ideas. The smartest thinkers stop speaking up. And you start executing hard on the wrong problem. And you solve the wrong problem. This is why Dalio warns on page 323, understanding what is true is essential for success, and being radically transparent helps create the understanding that leads to improvements. The fix is not just be nice and let everyone talk. It's structured dissent. It's about creating rules of engagement where disagreement is not just allowed but required. Dalio describes it like this on page 321. Put your honest thoughts on the table, have thoughtful disagreement, and abide by agreed upon ways of getting past disagreement. Let's break that down. The first part is put your honest thoughts on the table. No sugarcoating, no hedging, just say what you believe to be true. And the CEO's job is to make sure that everybody has a say. It reminds me of what Jeff Bezos said in a speech, where he said when he is the decision maker in the room. He makes sure everybody speaks, and he starts with the youngest one, lowest in the hierarchy, and works himself up the hierarchy until he heard every opinion in the room, then says what he thinks and makes a decision. That's why the second part is important. Have thoughtful disagreement. This isn't a shouting match. It's a deep curiosity about why the other person sees the world differently. And the third one, abide by decision rules. In Dalio's world, decisions are often settled by believability-weighted votes. You track who's constantly right in what domain, and their input carries more weight. This is not theory. It's embedded into Bridgewater software, team structure, and investment process. Now, imagine how this would change your deep tech startup. Instead of following the founder's gut, you are testing hypotheses across science, engineering, and market feedback and weighting input by who's earned the right to be heard in that arena. That's how you beat competitors, not by having one genius, but by systematically extracting truth from your team. Dalio puts it plainly on page 201. It's smarter and ultimately better for you to be open-minded and have faith that the consensus of believable others is better than whatever you think. Here is what this really is. It's a system for fighting your own ego. You don't have to be right. You just have to care more about getting it right than being right. And when a startup commits to that, you unlock something most companies never access. Compound intellectual leverage, the kind that can only come from multiple brilliant minds working in harmony, even while disagreeing. Dalio says, the best ideas win, not the best people. So let's wrap up with another 3 coaching questions to help you reflect on how you are making decisions in your fund or company. The first one. Where in your company are decisions still driven by hierarchy instead of evidence? Who on your team should have more say but gets overlooked because of politics or personality? What's one decision in the last 30 days where believability-weighted approach would have changed the outcome? And having said that, let's move to part number 5. It's all about the personalities of the founders that have built the biggest companies in the last 30 years, the shapers. Section 5, the title is Shapers Win. They dream big, think clear, and execute ruthlessly. You know the founder who always seems to pull off the impossible. The one who gets funding even when everyone doubts the idea, and then turns that idea into a product nobody saw coming. That's not luck. That's not magic. That is what Ray Dalio calls a shaper. And in deep tech, you need them more than anyone else. Those shapers, they are rare. They dream audaciously and execute relentlessly. They can see the big picture and obsess over the tiny gears. They question the status quo, not for the sake of rebellion, but because they actually see a better version of reality and they are determined to build it. Dalio writes on page 230, shapers like Steve Jobs get both the big picture and the tiny little details right. They can easily navigate back and forth between the two. This is what makes them so dangerous in the best way. Most founders lean on one way or the other. Either they are the visionary or they are the detail-oriented personality. Most founders lean one way or the other. Either they are visionary, stuck high up in the clouds, or they are the operators, so deep in the weeds they can't see where they are going. In martial arts, we say it's the dragon high up in the sky and the tiger grounded on earth. And VCs, they often reward the most polished tech or the strongest pedigree instead of identifying the rare shapers who can hold conflicting ideas in their mind and thrive in total chaos. But here is what happens when you don't bet on shapers. Your company plateaus. Your team stays comfortable. Dalio's research found that every single exceptional founder he studied, from Steve Jobs to Elon Musk, had a specific combination: intense curiosity, independent thinking, a need to dream big, practicality, and a compulsive need to make sense of things. It's in the book on page 230. What you want are people who can toggle between first principles and messy operations, between deep science and public storytelling, between big goals and day-to-day accountability. And when you find them, don't box them in. Don't over-process them. Let them build. Let them break things. Let them shape. Also on page 230, Ray Dalio puts it this way: people wired with enough of these ways of thinking that they can operate in the world as shapers are very rare. But they could never succeed without working with others who are more naturally suited for other things. Because here is the twist: you don't need to be a shaper to hire one. But you do need the humility to recognize them and the guts to back them. Dalio even built his firm to attract them. He says on page 193, I wanted people around me who could challenge me, who would disagree with me and help me see what I couldn't see. Shapers thrive when surrounded by believable people willing to challenge their thinking and when systems are in place to track reality, not just hope. Here is the deeper insight. Shapers are not immune to doubt or failure. They just use those moments as fuel. They evolve faster, they reflect deeper, they stay connected to the ground while building in the sky. And if you are serious about winning in deep tech, you need to ask, are you shaping the world or reacting to it? Because those are not the same path. So let's wrap up this section with my 3 questions to help you think about who the real shapers in your orbit are. The first one: who in your portfolio or company shows signs of being a true shaper, and how are you empowering them? The second one: what bold vision are you avoiding because it feels too ambitious or too risky? And the third one: where in your own thinking are you favoring polish over progress, and how could you shift back into shaping mode? Having said that, let's move on to the 6-part diagnose root causes, not just symptoms. So what does that mean? Diagnose root causes, not symptoms. Ray Dalio says in the book, page 482, if you don't go deep, you will solve the wrong problem. Have you ever experienced that you fixed something and it just broke again? A team problem you thought was solved comes back. A product issue that keeps resurfacing. Ray Dalio would say, you didn't go deep enough. You treated the symptom, you didn't solve the root. In deep tech, surface level fixes are seductive. A deadline slips, so you work late. The prototype breaks, so you patch it. But if you don't ask why it happened, if you don't figure out what system produced that failure, you're just spinning the hamster wheel. Dalio warns on page 175. Focus on the what is before deciding what to do. Because when you jump straight to the action, you are often solving the wrong thing. It's like playing chess. When you just use your first reaction and move, there's a high chance of failure. If you follow the process that you ask yourself after your opponent moved, what's the threat here? What's the weakness they created? What's my opportunity? What's a better move? And is there even a better one? And then move. If you don't do that, you will probably lose the game. But if you do that, you increase the odds of winning and solve the right thing. The problem is founders and teams often move fast. A lot of activity going in no direction. Speed is their default. reflection feels like a luxury. But what actually happens when you treat every fire as an isolated event? You react to surface level pain instead of fixing the machine that caused it. Dalio developed a whole playbook for this. It starts with a simple rule, page 175. Diagnose problems to get to the core of it, to get to their root causes. And the hard part, root causes are emotionally uncomfortable. They often involve you, your hiring mistake, your lack of process, your tendency to avoid confrontation. Dalio puts it plainly. Everyone has at least one big thing that stands in the way of their success. Find yours and deal with it. Because if you don't, you will see the same issues with different names, different people, and the same headache. Leaving your relationship? You can't leave yourself. You might just end up in the same situation with a different person. So what's the solution? Always start with the 5 whys. Literally ask, why 5 times, to drill a little bit deeper with every single answer. Why did the launch get delayed? That's the first why. Because QA wasn't ready. Don't stop there and don't fix the QA. Ask, why wasn't QA ready? The answer, because the scope changed last minute. Don't stop here. Why did the scope change? The answer, because priorities weren't clarified in planning. I think you get the idea now. Ask why, keep asking. Practice it every single day in your company. Dalio suggests this technique in his drill down method, page 492 to 493. Quickly inventory all the core problems in your company. Be very specific. Don't generalize or use we. Name names. Then identify the deep-seated reasons behind the actions that caused each problem. Yes, it's very uncomfortable. It will challenge your ego and the ego of every single person in your company. But ignoring it guarantees one thing. You will keep solving the same problem, but never ever will you change the results. Dalio reminds us, most problems happen for one of 2 reasons. It isn't clear who the responsible party is, or 2, the responsible party isn't handling their responsibility well. Here is the deeper truth. Diagnosing root causes isn't just operational hygiene. It's a superpower. It teaches your team how to think, not just react. It builds a culture where progress is earned, not assumed. And it helps you grow faster because you're honest about what's not working. Between a bad now and a good then is a working through it period. Ray Dalio puts it very beautifully on page 501 in the book. Root cause analysis is that working through it phase. You can't wish things into existence. You have to work through it. And it's the only way to build something that lasts. Again, we're at the end of the section. 3 questions. What issue has come up more than once in the past year, and did you ever actually diagnose it? Where have you been fixing symptoms when you should have been redesigning the system? What's the one big thing you know is in your way, but you haven't dealt with it yet? Let's move on to the final section. Be radically open-minded. Or as Ray Dalio puts it, sincerely believe you might not know the best possible path. Swim in the unknown. Page 188. Here's the weird part about smart people. The smarter they are, the harder it is for them to stay open-minded. Because intelligence is seductive. You are used to being right in your field. And if you're building a deep tech company or running a fund, You probably get rewarded for being right for years. But in frontier tech and venture, your ability to say, I might be wrong, I don't know everything about everything, is what actually makes you powerful. Dalio calls it the ego barrier, the instinct to protect your ideas even when they are wrong, and the blind spot barrier, that inability to see flaws in your own thinking. Here is the scary part, page 184. Even the most intelligent people behave this way, and it's tragic. He explains that every one of us is basically two people: the logically higher level you and the emotional lower level you. When someone challenges your thinking, your amygdala doesn't say, oh, cool, let's explore that. It says, attack, defend, control. This is biology at work. And if you don't recognize it, it owns you. The antidote is putting a little bit of Viktor Frankl in your behavior. Between the stimulus and your reaction, you create a space to think. And this gives you the power to respond in different ways appropriate to the situation and not just reacting to it. And here is the problem. As a founder or VC, you're supposed to be confident, but overconfidence, that's dangerous in complex environments. And let's face it, the science is never settled. The market is never predictable. And the people around you often see what you miss. Dalio puts it plainly again, page 188. Most people are so certain they are right that they don't allow themselves to see better alternatives. Closed-mindedness hides in plain sight or on social media these days. Dalio lists the signs. You make more statements than questions. You feel annoyed when challenged. You focus more on being understood than understanding it. You say things like, I could be wrong, but... and then ignore other views. Check it out in the book on page 196. He says, open-minded people are more curious about why there is disagreement. They feel compelled to see things through others' eyes. Dalio trains for open-mindedness like a mental discipline. Practice thoughtful disagreement, triangulate with believable people, assume your first answer is incomplete. Ask more questions than you give answers. Meditation helps slow down and let your higher level self lead. Dalio describes it on page 199, what the benefits of meditation in decision making in high risk positions are. And it's not only meditation, also running works wonder. You don't have to accept every critique, but you do have to genuinely explore it and be grateful for it. If you are surrounded by yes people or afraid to hear the tough stuff, you will make the same mistake Dalio made in 1982. He bet the firm on a big market call. He was wrong and he lost everything. So he had to rebuild from scratch, but this time he learned his lesson from his mistake. He says, I realized how wrong I could be. So I began to seek out thoughtful disagreement like oxygen. Open-mindedness is not weakness. It's strategic humility, a way to get stronger by absorbing perspective without losing your edge. Dalio says on page 188, you can't make a great decision without first swimming in the unknown. So here is your test. Are you the smartest person in the room? In your company or your fund? Then you're in the wrong room or you hired the wrong people. It's a harsh truth. That's why we go now to the free coaching questions so that you have something to reflect on to fix the issues in the company. The first one. Who's the most credible person you've recently disagreed with? And did you really explore their point of view? What's a belief you're emotionally attached to that may no longer be true? And the third question, have you built a culture at your fund or company where people are rewarded for challenging your thinking, not just agreeing with it? That was the final section. Now let's move to the final part of this podcast. The key takeaways, my personal reflection on the book and critique, and the closing remarks. Let's get into the key takeaways. Let's land this plane with 7 powerful takeaways that can sharpen how you build, invest, or lead in deep tech. Remember the first key takeaway. Build your company like a machine, not a hero's journey. Don't improvise your way to greatness. Architect it. Design systems that run without you. Most importantly, it's the second key takeaway. Get the people right. A great idea with the wrong team is a dead end. Dalio reminds us, the who is more important than the what. The third takeaway, practice radical truth and transparency. Most startups fail not from bad markets, but from people avoiding hard conversations. Name reality faster than others. The fourth point, create an idea meritocracy. Rank opinions by credibility, not title. Let truth, not politics, lead your decision making. The fifth one, find or become a shaper. Shapers can hold conflicting thoughts. They zoom out to vision and zoom in to execution. That's rare, and that's what wins. And the sixth one, diagnose root causes, not symptoms. If a problem keeps repeating, you're not being honest about what's actually broken. Keep asking why until it hurts. And the final part, the seventh one, be radically open-minded. Feedback isn't a threat. It's your survival strategy. Build the habit of thoughtful disagreement. All successful companies did that. It's the winning formula of all big companies that won in the last 3 decades. Whether it's Nvidia, whether it's Amazon or Netflix, they all practice radical and honest disagreement. Each of these 7 takeaways is a building block for systems level leadership. Now, here is the part that stuck with me, and maybe it struck you too. Dalio's entire worldview is built on rationality, precision, and systems thinking. He doesn't just lead with logic, he institutionalized it. And it's incredibly effective. Just look at Bridgewater. Bridgewater didn't become the world's largest hedge fund by accident. His approach, principles, algorithms, radical truth, it works. It's proven. Bridgewater is the result. But as I read through the book, I kept asking myself, what's the emotional cost of this system? Because Dalio's world doesn't exactly ooze warmth. There is very little in these pages about how people feel. It's about alignment, performance, accountability, not belonging, trust, or love. And this isn't just my personal read. Back in 2016, the New York Times reported that a Bridgewater employee described the company as a cauldron of fear and intimidation. The Wall Street Journal detailed how employees rate each other in real time on whether they are living up to the firm's principles, a system designed for transparency, but one that can feel deeply scrutinizing. Even Dalio himself has admitted that this environment is definitely not for everyone. For a hedge fund, that trade-off might be worth it. Precision trumps sentiment. But in a startup, a biotech lab, a venture firm, could a slight touch of more emotional intelligence build more loyalty, spark more creativity, prevent more burnout, and actually at the end of the day deliver better results? I don't have the answer. But I do know this tension between the head and the heart is something every founder and investor should sit with. Dalio shows what happens when you optimize for truth and outcomes, just purely driven on logic. The question I ask myself, and maybe you too, where do we draw the line between precision and humanity? Let's wrap this one up with my final reflection. Do you want to be the best performing organization? Or do you want to be known for building the most human one? Or is there a middle ground? Is it possible to be both at the same time and have better results than what Ray Dalio describes in his book's Principles? If this conversation made you curious, read the book. Dalio doesn't offer fluff, he offers a framework. And if you are leading a company or deploying capital, you need one. You can get Principles through the link in the show notes. It supports the show and gives you a front row seat into how one of the most influential investors of our time thinks. And if you have already read it, maybe read it again with new eyes. Look not just for what Dalio says, but for what he leaves out. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive into Ray Dalio's Principles. If this episode sparked a shift in how you think, here is how you can give back. Just click follow, leave a review, or share this episode with one founder or investor in your circle. It helps more than you think. It grows the show, brings in even more amazing guests, and most importantly, it keeps every insight here completely free for listeners, always and forever. I guarantee it. In the next episode, we are going to switch gears from systems to stories and explore another podcast where we talk about climate change. It's with Janos Pastor. Until then, design smarter, think deeper, and don't forget to question your own principles. See you next time.